Hi, this is my honors project. It is a lab support online ticketing system that allows students to speak to staff about the problems they're having with their lab work. This was developed because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and that meant that students could not attend learning face to face. So lab work was more difficult than it used to be. Therefore, an online alternative had to be developed. Students need a way to speak to their educators about issues with lab work, and staff need a way to organise this and speak to those students. So, to develop this, I decided to use a web app because I wanted it to be usable on browsers for both staff and students without them being required to download anything. It was developed using a form of the agile process, but in two stages. This started with front end and ended with back end. And to create this, I used ASP.NET Core and MongoDB. I'm just going to show you a demo of this. So if I sign out here, you can see that it uses a University of Dundee account. So if I log in, you can see that there's a splash screen here, and the same one you'd see on MyDundee. So it's a similar experience to MyDundee. That's how it's designed, so that it emulates, what students are used to. So this is what a student would see. Um, by default, they have no privileges. They're just using this to speak to someone. So all they can do is enter a lab code and a description of their problem. A staff member would see a different screen, and a lab tutor would also see the same screen. So I'm just going to change this to a lab tutor or a staff screen. Okay, so now I've been added, you'll see that I see a different screen. This is what a lab tutor or a staff member would see. So by default, a staff member sees this, but a lab tutor can be any student. So if a member of staff wants to promote a student to lab tutor to help out with the lab, they just need to press new lab tutor and enter their University of Dundee email address. It only takes University of Dundee email address. So, for example, I'll just do labtutor@dundee.ac.uk. So now a student who logs in with that email will also be a lab tutor and see the screen. So the first thing you'd want to do then, if you wanted to speak to a student, would be to create a queue. So to create a queue, you need a practical session name. So we're just going to call this Rocket Science. And you need a link to join Teams meeting. So Microsoft Teams meeting seemed appropriate because it allows for one-on-one speaking to students over the internet. So to get one of this working, you'd need a Microsoft Teams meeting link. So to access that, I have prepared this. So I'm just going to copy this meeting link. And if I paste that in here, and we're going to make it 15 minutes long. I'm going to create this queue. So this is what the page looks like. This is the queue management screen. So this will show any information about students who have joined the lab. So if I turn to the home page then, I'm going to join it as a student. So you see the example. A staff or a lab tutor can also join a queue just in case they want to test to see if it works, or if they want to speak to a different member of staff or a lab tutor. So all we need is this code. So this code is a randomly generated 6-digit number that is unique to the lab session itself. I'll explain more about that later. So just put that in and you'd say the description of your problem. So we're going to say help, my PC won't turn on. And also there is notification options. So You can turn the sound, vibration, push notifications off and on. So we're going to put those on for now. And we're going to join the queue. So you can see here it says ticket accepted, waiting for a member of staff. There's a little loading animation. Tells me how many students are remaining ahead of me and how many students are queuing and the average wait time. So this is rounded to the nearest minute, so we haven't been waiting over 30 seconds, so it says 0 minutes. On the queue manager screen, we can see that it says that there's one student remaining. We can also see the description of their problem and how long they've been waiting. So there's two ways of speaking to this student. The lab tutor or staff member can choose to speak to the next student, this meaning the student who's been waiting the longest. As it is designed for a queue, this meets this requirement. Or based on the severity of their issue, they can choose to bring the student to the front. So if I show you here, yeah, we can see the average wait time has updated. So if I bring the student to the front, see it says 0 students remaining, then on this screen, yeah, we get a notification and there was a sound that played there also. So if I choose to join this session, we can choose to open Microsoft Teams if we wish. And so you can see that I'm here. So if I press join, I am in the rocket science meeting. So if there was a lab tutor here, I'd be able to speak to them. Now, if we just return then, I'm just going to show you a few more options that a member of staff would have, or a lab tutor. So if they want someone to help out with the same lab as that they're currently working on, they can add a lab tutor to queue. So as it says here, the lab tutor would need to be added as a lab tutor if there are students, for them to be able to see the screen. So we're going to add lab tutor. And then in here, the user would put their own Teams meeting link. So the idea is that, let's say there's 3 different staff members and 2 lab tutors. Whoever chooses to speak to who clicks on next student, say, or the arrows, will they will be speaking to that student, not just whoever's free. So it is specific to them. So they would be speaking one-on-one with that student. So I'm just going to copy this link again. It'll only take a Teams meeting link. So I'm going to copy this again and just paste this here. And now we have another lab tutor helping with this queue. So we can also remove this lab tutor just using this color-coded button. And if we press delete, we can see also who each lab tutor is speaking to. So if we press delete, it's just myself now. So no matter how many lab tutors are here, they will all use the same code because it's related from this one session. If the lab session needs to have different codes, say students need to speak to specific lab tutors, then that can be done just by creating separate queues, which would then also have separate codes. So to finish, a member of staff, if they're finished with their queue or their lab session, they can just press end session. At the moment, you can see that there are 9 minutes remaining. However, whenever this goes over the designated time, the font appears bigger in red. I can show you that afterwards. But at the moment, if we just press end session, that session is now deleted and the code will no longer work. So we can see that if it runs over, the font appears larger. It says the lab is running 2 minutes over. If this number gets to 10, the lab will automatically close, as it is time sensitive, being a lab session, and will be timetabled. Yeah, so this web app then was evaluated by 14 users, 12 of which were students and 2 were teaching staff. These participants overall rated the performance of the system as 9.25 out of 10 and overall evaluated very positively. There were some suggestions for changes, this being the font of this table being increased to be more readable. These buttons were colored accordingly for add and remove, so green associated with positive and red with negative. This was already the case for error messages and success messages, which you'd see when you're adding a lab tutor or removing a lab tutor. There also is an option where a lab tutor would, if they ended the queue prematurely and there was still students in the queue, I'll show you what I mean by this, and there's still students in the queue, they would see a table of all these students. So the evaluation table. So yeah, I'm queuing in this now. Also, if a lab tutor was to end their session, the queue would still persist as long as at least one member of staff or lab tutor is still available. This means that if someone has to leave, it still persists no matter if they end session or they're removed by someone else. It will still exist. It's just when the last member of staff or lab tutor ends the session, it deletes and everyone is deleted from the queue. So if the last staff member or lab tutor does delete the queue early while there are students in it, they will see a table of all the students who were not spoken to and how long they waited, their description, and their name. Okay, so yeah, that was suggested by a member of staff, and it was thus added. So to summarize then, I'm happy with the final solution, and based on evaluations, I feel it successfully provides a way to manage an online lab session and also provides support for students. If I was to continue this project, I would like to include an option for allowing students to create a group so they could join Teams meetings together. This was something else that was suggested by members of staff during evaluation, because sometimes students would get into groups in a real practical session and they prefer to join and speak to members of staff together. And I also feel a Microsoft Teams plugin would be a great addition, as if it was built, it could detect when students leave and then they'd be automatically removed from the front of the queue. So thank you very much. That was my demo of my honours project.